This video was made possible by Wix. If you're ready to create a website, head on over to wix.com/go/infographics2019 to try out one of their premium plans right now. According to Greek mythology, an immortal being named Prometheus stole fire from the gods and bestowed it upon humanity, the first of many gifts to enable the beginning of civilization. Early Chinese histories tell of a succession of 8 semi-divine leaders who in turn taught hunting, farming, music, working with silk, and all of the practical arts. In similar fashion, Sumerian god Enki shared the wisdom needed for governing the earliest cities with a group of 7 sages. Stories of heroes like these are common around the world. When ancient storytellers looked back, trying to imagine the beginnings of technology, communication systems, and religious customs, the complexities seemed best explained as gifts from a divine intelligence, and they had good reason to wonder about their own origins. Writing, as far as we know, arose as a product of civilization. The earliest phases of the first civilization left no written records. So where did civilization really come from? Once writing arises in a civilization, it may offer a big spike in the amount of data available to scientists, but not necessarily. The writing systems of the Indus Valley civilization and the Minoan civilization of Crete are just 2 examples that are still a mystery. Unless we manage to make sense of these symbols, much of their culture and history will remain opaque. The decipherment of the Egyptian hieroglyphics, Mayan glyphs, and the cuneiform writing of the Mesopotamian empires each opened up entire worlds of literature, chronicles of dynasties, and a high level of scientific knowledge among these ancient peoples. But the earliest phases of each civilizations don't have writing. In a way, when it comes to eras with no written history, we have a similar problem to the authors of the ancient myths. But rather than appeal to divine intervention, modern researchers can literally dig for the evidence, building upon a century of increasingly sophisticated archaeological methods. One of the central questions in piecing together the history of civilization is the extent to which ideas and technologies spread from one region to another. In the most extreme view, called hyperdiffusionism, civilization started once in a single location and then gradually spread everywhere else. Social scientists have long abandoned the single origin model, instead seeing various societies developing in parallel. On the other hand, there's a great deal of evidence for trade, war, and other forms of contact between many cities of the ancient world within their respective regions, over considerable distances for pack animals or early navigators. Jewelry from the valley of the Indus River in South Asia turns up in Mesopotamia. The striking blue stone lapis lazuli makes its way from Afghanistan to Egypt. Some of the most significant diffusion came in the spread of domesticated crops and animals. Wheat, for instance, started out as a wild grass in the Middle East. More than 10,000 years ago, people were already planting it as a staple crop in that region, beginning the process of breeding varieties better suited for consumption and harvest than their wild cousins. Over time, these crops and the knowledge to grow and process them spread outward, reaching southeastern Europe by as early as 9,000 years ago, and other parts of Europe over the course of the following 3,000 years. Similarly, corn, or maize, starts out as a much scrawnier wild grain called teosinte in southern Mexico. As early as 10,000 years ago, ancient farmers there began breeding maize into varieties resembling the modern crop. From there, corn made its way northward via trade network or other interregional contact to the desert of the Southwest, the Mississippi, and beyond. Other innovations spread through a literal arms race. The phase Bronze Age refers to different actual periods of time in different locations. Archaeologists use the term to describe a span of time beginning when the bronze tools show up in a region and lasting until iron implements made their local debut. The manufacturing of bronze can only happen if you have a supply of copper, tin, and sometimes other metals, one or more of which may require long-distance trade. And of course, you have to understand the process of casting bronze once you have the materials. But if you know that neighboring states are arming themselves with bronze weapons, you have a strong incentive to figure out a way to make that happen. Its utility in both weapons and tools encouraged the spread of bronze technology throughout West Asia, Northern Africa, and the Mediterranean. Bronze also spread within East Asia, starting in China, where its manufacture seems to have arisen independently. A similar process of military competition spread the use of horses and war chariots. In archaeological terms, before the Bronze Age came the Neolithic, and in some ways this is where the greatest mystery lies. Whereas the transition from stone tools to metal is partial, gradual, and not even essential, the Maya and the Aztec did just fine with razor-sharp obsidian, the Neolithic represented a basic break from what had been the normal social model that was in place, even before the arrival of modern Homo sapiens. The beginning of the Neolithic or New Stone Age is sometimes called a revolution. In a Paleolithic or Old Stone Age society, the group size is limited to a few dozen individuals. Life revolves around the procurement of food from the land, gathering wild plants, catching fish, and hunting game. This is not always a bad thing. In a region and time when resources are plentiful, the effort needed for subsistence can be low, allowing people to live a varied, fulfilling, and meaningful life. But there's not always a safety net if circumstances take a bad turn. Storing a surplus is a challenge if you are frequently on the move. If for some reason the supply of game dwindles, you may have a hard time. Lots of large mammal species died off at the end of the last ice age. Evidence suggests that Homo sapiens may have been a little too skillful at hunting for their own good, leaving populations too small to recover in one region after another. Whatever the reason, the strategies for survival among many groups of people had to change in the millennia between 2,000 and 10,000 years ago. After the last ice age, for the first time, people began putting down roots in a literal sense. Agriculture seems to have been one of the most important adaptations to the new environmental challenges. The early agrarian societies could stockpile some surplus. The extra food allowed some members of a community to invest labor in specialized activities, such as pottery and tool manufacture, which in turn could help grow and store crops. Populations rose along with increased harvests. Another innovation, organized violence. One community might raise a neighbor's stockpiles or fight over the control of limited resources. Defense became important. Conflict may have helped bring on another side effect of sedentary life, the development of social hierarchies. Some individuals became leaders in combat, but also ultimately for projects such as the digging of irrigation canals for crops and building of public structures like religious sites and fortifications. Leadership seems to have fostered privilege, either through voluntary acknowledgement or as coerced tribute. High status might then pass from one generation to the next. But even if you could defend your supplies, a prolonged drought or deluge had the prospect of slow starvation. And so two tasks became paramount: an understanding of the seasons and making sure the gods of the harvest were pleased or at least appeased. Both religious rituals and cycles of planting and harvest involved reading the signs in the sky. Exactly how the heavens ruled the earth was a matter for the storytellers, but it was a demonstrable fact that nature of the seasons held sway over life and death. The procession of the constellations, the phases of the moon, the lengths of the days, and the direction of the sun all somehow related to the yearly changes in rainfall and the growth of plants. In the isolated villages of hunter-gatherers, shamans could intercede between the world of human beings and the spirits, answering questions as they arose. But as towns grew, they required a more institutionalized approach to maintaining the cosmic order, and with it, the rainfall, the harvests, and even the daily procession of the sun. The gods needed priests, and often they needed blood. In places where farming developed, a culture of sacrifice seems to have followed. Some of the grain, some of the alcohol, the fruits of the field were reserved for the gods, returned in thanksgiving to ensure that the earth would continue to provide. And where animals were raised, their slaughter was in some measure dedicated to the patron deities of the tribe. Of course, giving the best part of a precious resource back to the gods could be counterproductive. Hence, another myth of Prometheus. He once tricked Zeus into accepting a sacrifice of bones and fat, reserving the meat for human beings, and setting a precedent that the Greeks could follow thereafter. Zeus wasn't amused, and the gods could demand much more. If they needed human blood, they would get it. And so a pattern followed. Populations grew as food security increased. Settlements exceeded 10,000 people, first in Western Asia and soon in Egypt, South Asia, and China, eventually in Europe, Southeast Asia, Mesoamerica, and South America, and finally in North America. And in general, once a critical mass arrived, a professional priesthood emerged, often with the grim business of human sacrifice. Still, if civilization became a stage for the conflicts between human and cosmic life and death, it also became a platform for the ever-expanding repertoire of innovations. As they studied the skies, the Sumerians and Babylonians not only intuited the will of the heavens, but also established the beginnings of science. The same characters that the kings of China's Shang state had etched into the bones for divination allowed for the compositions of the philosophies of Confucius and Lao Tzu. Baking bread naturally led to baking exquisite clay pottery, and the same melted alloy of ores could allow one to cast a sword or a sublime work of classical sculpture. So what led to civilization? Necessity, coercion, community, inertia, fear, pragmatism, and imagination. In short, humanity. Phew, that was a complicated one. Not everything in life needs to be so complicated though. Take for example, building a website. With Wix, you can have a great looking website up and running in seconds by using one of their fully customizable templates, or you can use their powerful design tools to design something exclusively yours. Their subscription service offers 24/7 tech support, and they have an incredibly robust knowledge base, which we describe as being more valuable than gold when building a website. So try out Wix today by visiting the link in the description or going to wix.com/go/infographics2019. Are there mysteries about the ancient world that fascinate you? Let us know in the comments. Also, be sure to check out our other video called Unbelievable Stuff They Didn't Teach You About Ancient Egypt. Thanks for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. See you next time.